The moment her laughter broke through the wine-slicked air, something in my chest went still. We were sitting at a long candlelit table in one of those rustic bistros that serve $12 kale, surrounded by her polished friends, women who speak like they're always auditioning for a reality show, and men who nod for a living. I'd come straight from soccer practice with our youngest, still had that faint smell of artificial turf clinging to me. She knew that. She picked the time. I mean, he's amazing with the kids, she said, swirling her Chardonnay, flashing that practiced grin. But let's be honest, he's not a real man. The laughter hit like a slap. It was automatic. Reflexive. One of her friends even snorted. I didn't say a word. Didn't blink. Just reached for the check before the waiter could even ask, dropped my card in the folder, and gave the table a slow, polite smile like I was watching them all from behind bulletproof glass. Babe, don't pout, she added, like I was some toddler denied dessert. You know I'm just teasing. No, she wasn't. Not tonight. Not with them. And we both knew it. When the receipt came, I signed it without looking, folded my napkin, pushed in my chair. Then I walked out. Listen, quick break. We set a goal to hit 10K subscribers. So tap subscribe if you're liking these wild stories of betrayal. Now let's get back to the madness. The air outside was wet and electric, the kind of heat that soaks into your skin before your clothes. I stood by the curb for 3 seconds before the black SUV rolled up, purring like a secret. The windows were tinted dark enough to make your own reflection feel like someone else. The back door swung open. A woman stepped out. Mid-40s, maybe. No smile, no small talk, just a nod and a clipboard under her arm. Gray suit. No jewelry except for a stainless steel watch that looked more like a countdown than an accessory. Behind me, the restaurant door creaked. Who was that? My wife's voice wobbled, but I didn't turn. I slid into the SUV without a word. The woman climbed in after me, closed the door. We pulled away. I didn't look back, but I could feel her confusion through the glass. Could imagine her standing there, trying to figure out if that was a lawyer, a lover, or something worse. Something she hadn't accounted for. Everything's been set in motion, the woman said evenly, flipping open her tablet. We're just waiting on your final signature for phase 1. I nodded. I'd already made the choices weeks ago. The night I found the photo in her jewelry drawer, folded, old, but recent enough. Her and her so-called trainer, laughing in that same damn bistro, arm in arm like they owned the night. Back then, I didn't explode. I didn't accuse. I calculated. I moved funds. I moved ownership. I smiled at the kids, kissed her goodnight, played my role with such grace she never saw the curtain twitch. But now? Now the first domino had tipped. And the woman next to me, Amanda, senior counsel at a family office so private they don't even have a website, was my insurance policy against every stupid assumption my wife had ever made about what kind of man I was. She's going to call, Amanda said, tapping the screen. You want me to handle it? No, I said. Let her stew. By the time her friends paid their own checks and stepped out to see the SUV disappear down Main Street, their smiles would have wilted. Because whatever story she tried to spin, he's just mad, he's being dramatic, it wouldn't land. They saw that car. They saw me get in. And they saw a woman step out with papers. In that moment, something shifted in the air around her. Something final. I wasn't the soft, easy guy who makes pancakes and apologizes for not being exciting enough. I wasn't the punchline anymore. I was the one leaving her behind in the middle of her perfect little dinner party, with her perfect little lies. And I wasn't coming back. 3 months before that dinner, while she was sipping margaritas with her girls on some beach with fake palm trees, I was in a cold office with no windows, across from a woman who didn't blink once the entire meeting. Amanda. Same suit, same tone, same clipboard. You don't find women like her on Yelp. Mr. Langford, she said, sliding a slim folder across the table, I believe you're aware of the risks of passive generosity. But let's get tactical. That was the first time I heard the phrase passive generosity used like an insult. And she was right. I'd been generous, yes. Stupidly so. But not anymore. That day, we began rewriting my entire life on paper. By the second meeting, my name had been separated from every account we shared. Retirement? Split. Savings? Drained and rerouted. The house, the car, even the lake cabin we never used? all transferred to an LLC registered under a trust fund I'd quietly named after my late father. She never met him. Wouldn't even recognize the name. Just thought it was some dead uncle. She thought I spent my Thursday evenings at that Dad Circle parenting group at the community center. I did. For 20 minutes. Then I headed downtown, changed jackets in the car, and took the elevator up to the 19th floor of a building whose parking garage doesn't even list a tenant directory. She thought I was the harmless, weekday husband, the kind you complain about to friends over wine. She used to laugh when I sorted receipts or updated our budget in Excel like I was role-playing as a 1950s accountant. "You're cute when you spreadsheet," she'd say, barely looking up from her phone. Cute. Meanwhile, I was tracing every automatic payment she forgot she set up in her name. Subscription boxes, gym memberships, secretive Venmo aliases. I knew more about her me time than she did. My lawyer helped me redraw the lines so slowly, so cleanly, it felt like origami. Quiet folds of paper until everything she thought she held in her hands was actually sitting in a steel cabinet 2 floors below mine. Legally sealed. Legally hers, to admire from a distance. We even drafted a power of attorney for an emergency she doesn't need to know about yet. Amanda called it a just-in-case trigger. I called it an off switch. And the resentment that used to keep me up at night? Gone. Replaced with something colder. Cleaner. Detachment is beautiful when it's planned. The irony is, she used to complain I was too still. "You never react," she'd say. "You just fold in." She mistook that for weakness. Most people do. What she didn't understand is that men like me don't fold. We record. Archive. Strategize. We turn off the fire alarms and let the house fill with smoke while everyone else throws wine at the curtains. I wasn't trying to win her back. I was trying to win. And she hadn't even realized a game had started. Because in her world, power was loud. Bigger rings, louder voices, flashier dinners. In mine, power was who holds the deed. And who disappears first. It started with a vibration on my phone that I almost ignored. I was standing in the garage, reorganizing a box of Christmas lights in May, because that's what you do when your house is quiet but your mind isn't. I thought it was another spam text, those AI-generated ones promising crypto salvation. But it wasn't. Mirati. "Hey, that was awful. You didn't deserve it." I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Mira was one of her people. One of the country club brunchers. One of the candle branding, Pilates talking, white wine loyalists who usually laughed at the same jokes my wife made. So why now? Why me? I typed a polite thank you. Nothing dramatic. Nothing emotional. Just enough to acknowledge receipt, like a man responding to condolences after a small funeral. But before I hit send, my thumb hovered. Then I added, "Appreciate that. If you ever want to talk more, lunch is on me." No emoji. No implication. Just bait. She bit. We met the next day at a downtown place my wife had once called too boring for her friends. Quiet tables. Real linen. Nobody taking selfies. Mira walked in without makeup, without pretense. Almost like she wanted to shed something before she crossed the threshold. "I don't usually do this," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "That makes 2 of us," I said. What followed was 3 courses of emotional excavation. At first, it was light. She apologized again for the dinner. Said she used to think my wife was just joking, that I was in on it. Then her voice cracked on that phrase, like it suddenly felt dirty. But then she leaned in. "I know about Darren," she said, glancing over her shoulder. And not just him. That name landed like a weight I'd already memorized. Darren, the tennis trainer. The one I'd photographed by the pool house. But not just him? I kept my face steady. Let her keep going. "She talks a lot when she drinks," Mira said. "At this little after-hours wine circle thing they do. You weren't just the guy she mocked. You were the excuse. You were the stability she resented needing." That sentence sat with me. The excuse. I was the reason she got to play reckless without guilt. Because I'd be there. Folding laundry. Packing lunches. Picking her up at the airport after trips that weren't always for work. She said you were like wallpaper, Mira added softly. Always there. Easy to ignore until someone else points it out. That one stung more than I expected. Then Mira did something unexpected. She reached into her purse and slid her phone across the table. Text messages. Screenshots. Photos. Nothing graphic, but context is its own crime. Flirty nicknames from numbers I didn't recognize. Inside jokes that didn't include me. Time-stamped girls' nights that were 2 states away from where she said she'd be. She always said you wouldn't care, Mira whispered. Said you'd never do anything. I exhaled through my nose and smiled. Not warmly. Not bitterly. Just surgically. Maybe she's right, I said. But Mira saw it. The shift. She straightened in her chair. You're doing something. I didn't confirm. Didn't deny. I just asked if she'd like dessert. She declined. But she didn't leave. We sat another hour, talking about nothing and everything: kids, schools, the way people pretend better than they live. That night, I got home to find my wife on the couch, wine glass in hand, rewatching an old sitcom she used to say was comfort food. She smiled at me like nothing had changed. Like I hadn't just spent 3 hours with someone who quietly torched her entire facade. Good day? She asked. Yeah, I said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. Lunch ran long. It did. And it was worth every second. Thursday, 6:14 p.m. The country club was predictably smug. White stucco walls, overpriced landscaping, valet staff who looked too clean to sweat. I parked a few rows back, under the pretense of attending a gentleman's networking hour, a lie I told no one but myself. The truth was in the glove compartment, a compact DSLR with a long lens, half-charged, ready. She told me she was going to sweat it out with the girls. That was her phrase. Said it like she was in some war zone of Pilates mats and cucumber water. I nodded, smiled, told her to have fun. Then I picked up our son, made him a quesadilla, and watched him build a Lego helicopter with more structural integrity than our marriage. At 6:28, she pulled in. Silver Lexus. Same white tennis skirt she always wore when she wanted to look casually rich. She didn't see me. She never looked around unless there was someone to impress. I waited. The trainer arrived 7 minutes later. Darren. Tan. Toned. The kind of guy who makes a living adjusting rich women's posture and boundaries. I didn't hate him. That would have been too generous. I watched them meet at the court. Rackets in hand. Perform drills for 15 minutes, forehands, backhands, side laughs. But even from my distance, you could tell it wasn't a lesson. It was foreplay in the shape of cardio. At 7:03, they walked toward the pool house. I knew this part. She once joked that nobody goes back there unless they're cheating or hiding. Said it with a smirk, like someone who'd memorized the blueprint. I took the camera, rolled down the passenger window. No shaking. No rage. Just precision. Click. Click. They didn't rush. They didn't hide. It wasn't some panicked teenage tryst. It was choreography. Practiced. Familiar. His hand on her lower back. Her fingers in his collar. Then the kiss. Click. That one stayed on the screen a little longer. She leaned into him like gravity wasn't enough. He braced her hips like he owned them. I zoomed out. Got the background, club logo, the car lot, a glimpse of the clock tower. Context matters when you're building a portfolio. Then I put the camera away. Drove home. Didn't speak to anyone. Didn't drink. Didn't even delete the photos. I just made mac and cheese. At 9:11, she walked in. Hair pulled up, skin glowing from either exertion or satisfaction. It didn't matter. She kissed me on the cheek, breezy and warm, like a wife in a detergent commercial. Thanks for watching the kids. You're amazing, she said, placing her tennis bag on the counter like it hadn't just held the weight of 2 lies and a racket. I looked at her and smiled. Not a sarcastic one. Not bitter. Just still. You have a good workout? I asked. She nodded. We pushed hard today. I bet, I said. She poured a glass of wine, asked what the kids ate, made a comment about the neighbor's trash bins being too full. And I stood there, watching her. Really watching. Not the way a man watches a lover. The way a man watches a machine he's just learned how to shut down, without a sound, without a warning. Because in that moment, I wasn't broken. I was free. Not from her, not yet. But from doubt. And when you take doubt away from a man like me, what you're left with is strategy. She went to bed before me. Said she had a call early in the morning. I stayed up, backing up files to a flash drive. Organizing. Encrypting. Naming folders with innocent labels, Q1 expenses, kids' vaccines, insurance 2024. All lies. But then again, so was she. We met at a nondescript office park behind a dentist's clinic. It was the kind of place you drive past 100 times and never notice, which was exactly the point. Amanda liked shadows. and I was learning to appreciate them too. She was already seated when I arrived. Gray blazer, hair tied back, two black folders on the table. One labeled exit, the other fallout. I took a seat without speaking, and she slid the exit file toward me with a pen clipped to the top. "You still sure you want this?" she asked, no judgment in her voice, just confirmation. Like a surgeon checking if I was still consenting to amputation. "I've never been more certain," I said. She didn't smile, just nodded. The plan wasn't dramatic. It was elegant. Surgical. First, we initiated the transfer of full legal custody of our children into a shared trust, one that granted me custodial authority and made her the non-controlling beneficiary. In plain English, I would make all the decisions, but she'd still get to feel like a parent on paper. It was dressed in language that sounded fair but wasn't. That was Amanda's specialty, making ruin look like mercy. Then came the financial locks. We froze the joint accounts, without notice. Her credit cards would continue working for 30 days, just enough for her to think nothing had changed. But behind the scenes, everything she spent would trigger alerts and timestamps. We were tracing her rhythm, mapping where she ran when the lights went out. Next, the house. The property had already been moved into the LLC. But now Amanda added something cruelly brilliant. We filed a forbearance clause in the event of marital dissolution, essentially letting me remove her residence rights without violating any formal eviction rules. It looked like a business adjustment, nothing more. But what it meant was that the moment I filed, she'd legally become a guest in her own home. I read each page, each line. Did I hesitate? Not for a second. Not after watching her press her body into another man behind a pool house, then kiss me like I was a doorstop. Not after years of micro-cuts disguised as humor, of turning my silence into her stage. Amanda waited as I signed, page by page. The pen felt heavier than it should have. At the end, she tapped the folder once and said, "You're officially an iceberg, Mr. Langford." She only sees the tip. We scheduled phase 2. This would be the soft demolition. Transferring the family's digital life to a separate cloud account, migrating the kids' school profiles to an alternate email, mine, removing her as the emergency contact, quietly, gently, without waves. Death by subtraction. "She'll ask questions," I said. "She won't," Amanda replied. "She's too busy thinking you're still in shock." That's her mistake. And it was. She mistook my stillness for paralysis. But in truth, I was already in motion, clean, quiet, precise. Like a bomb ticking under silk sheets. The last thing Amanda handed me was a sealed envelope. Inside, a list of contingency moves. Divorce filing locations in 3 states. All no fault. All favorable to me. All pre-vetted. "One last thing," she said, pausing before I stood. "If you want out, we can make this painless for the kids," she repeated. But not for her. There was a pause in me. Not hesitation. Calculation. "Let her feel everything she made me swallow," I said. Amanda didn't smile, but there was something like approval in her silence. When I stepped back into my car, I didn't feel rage. Rage was for amateurs. What I felt was structure. Clean lines. A floor plan for detachment. The countdown had started. She just didn't hear the ticking. But she would. It started like all poison does. Slow, invisible, and served in casual conversation. 2 Saturdays after the country club incident, she met her girlfriends for brunch. The usual crowd, influencers in early menopause, women whose dogs had therapists, and one ex-real estate agent who now coaches women in confidence. Same place as always, same overpriced eggs, same fake laughter. But something felt off. Mira arrived late. Lip gloss perfect, sunglasses sharp, and, most damning of all, smiling like she knew something nobody else did. She didn't kiss cheeks. Didn't compliment shoes. She just sat down and ordered black coffee. That was the first sign. Then came the question. "So what exactly does your husband do again?" Lauren asked, tone soaked in nonchalance but sharpened like a shiv. My wife blinked. Fork paused halfway to her mouth. "What do you mean?" she said, feigning confusion. "I mean like, do?" Lauren clarified. "I realized I don't even know what he does all day. He's always around, but, like, in the background. Quiet. Kind of loaded." There were chuckles. Nervous ones. Another friend added, Mira said you two had lunch last week. And that did it. A tiny fracture split across her smile. She hadn't known about that. Mira never told her. Mira, her friend, had been meeting with her husband. Alone. She tried to laugh it off, said something about Mira being a bleeding heart for strays, but it didn't land. Not when Mira just raised her cup and said, "He's sharper than you think. Way sharper." Then silence. Thick. Drowning. And for the first time in her curated, manicured, Instagram perfect life, my wife couldn't explain her husband. Because she didn't know me. Not really. She knew the schedule I kept, when I picked up the kids, when I ordered groceries, when I kissed her cheek goodnight. But the rest? The office she never visited. The LLC she never asked about. The trust accounts she assumed were mutual. She didn't even know which bank I used. And now, her friends were realizing that too. I became a question mark in their group thread. A variable. A man with no digital footprint, no ego, no slips. That kind of silence? It's not just suspicious. It's terrifying. Because men like that don't react. They design. That afternoon, she texted me. "Hey, you okay? You've been quiet lately." I replied 2 hours later. "Just thinking." She pressed again. "About what?" I left that one on read. Let her marinate. Later that night, she brought it up while folding laundry. "So apparently you've been having lunch with Mira now," she said, trying for casual. It sounded like someone balancing a smile over a minefield. I shrugged. She reached out. Figured it was polite to respond. "She's talking. People are asking questions." "That's new." I asked, raising an eyebrow. "I thought you liked when people talked." She didn't answer. She was starting to feel it now, that eerie vacuum where her control used to be. All the little things she used to take for granted, the side-eyed jokes, the knowing looks from her friends, the unspoken status she clung to like air, all beginning to slip. And Mira? Mira was no longer orbiting her. She was orbiting me, which meant the center of gravity had shifted. And my wife, for the first time in years, was realizing she was no longer the sun. Just another fading star. The invitation came by email. Not text. Not group chat. Email. Subject line. Dinner at the Langfords, Friday 7 p.m. The name alone, the Langfords, was enough to make her pause. Because she hadn't hosted anything in months. Not since her last ladies' wine night, flopped when only 2 women showed up, and one of them left early to let the dog out. So when she clicked the email and saw my name signed at the bottom, Daniel Langford, her stomach curled. It was clean, direct. No smiley faces. No "hope you can make it" crap. Just an RSVP link. And a guest list. She scrolled. Scanned. Her own name wasn't even bolded. Just another line. And Darren? Omitted completely. Friday came fast. She took hours to get ready. Hair curled, contour sharp, perfume loud enough to claim airspace. She wore a navy dress she hadn't touched in years. One she used to say was for big nights. Tonight, she was reclaiming ground. Or trying to. The house had been cleaned professionally. She could tell. There were flowers, tasteful ones. Lighting dimmed to that perfect golden hour glow. Music humming low in the background. Not her usual overdone Pinterest aesthetic. Something more deliberate. She walked in like she owned it. Then froze. Mira was there. Already seated. Already laughing. With me. And not the polite, "I'm being supportive" kind of laugh. No, this was warm, natural. Familiar. She watched as I leaned in to whisper something, and Mira placed a hand on my arm like she'd done it before. Every woman in the room noticed. Dinner was plated, not served. Catered, but disguised to look homemade. I made small talk with everyone, poured wine, led with stories, business stories, not dad anecdotes. I talked about projects I'd quietly built, properties I'd bought, deals I'd passed on. They listened, really listened. One of her friends, Jenna, actually said, "Wow, I didn't know you were in real estate." I smiled. Not just real estate, but that's where I like to play. That line landed. I saw the shift in their faces. The man they'd once reduced to the kid wrangler now had presence, power. And she was silent, like background noise. She tried to inject herself a few times. A compliment here, a half-joke there. Nothing stuck. The room had tilted, and she wasn't the center anymore. She wasn't even on the map. She finally snapped when Mira mentioned our lunch again. Casually, over dessert. It's funny, Mira said. I always assumed you were a numbers guy. But you're more like architecture. The way you think. My wife interrupted, sharp. Well, I guess he's changed. He never used to be this visible. I turned to her slowly. Held her gaze just long enough. No, I said. I've always been this way. You just never looked. The room fell quiet. Someone coughed. She laughed. Thin. Dry. Well, forgive me for not realizing I married Gordon Gecko. I smiled politely. That's all right. Not everyone's expected to keep up. Another pause. Then someone chuckled. Then another. Mira smirked into her glass. The table moved on. She didn't. After everyone left, she lingered in the hallway, heels in one hand, rage coiled behind her eyes. You humiliated me, she hissed. No, I said calmly, collecting glasses from the table. You just saw yourself from the outside for once. She stood there like a statue in heels, silent, exposed, unsure. And as I rinsed the wine glasses and she disappeared upstairs without another word, I realized something. She wasn't scared because I'd changed. She was scared because I hadn't. She just finally noticed. I brought it up while we were driving back from a school recital. Our daughter's piano piece had gone off-key halfway through, and we were both still riding that fragile silence parents know all too well. She sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, staring out the window like the trees had insulted her. I was thinking, I said, keeping my tone casual, maybe we take a weekend. Just us. She turned her head slowly, like it was a test. A weekend? Yeah, the Ridge. That place up in Vermont. Remember? I booked it years ago, just never used it. She blinked. The Ridge? That spa place with the fire pits and that creepy glass library? I nodded. Same one. Still valid. They called to check if I wanted to renew the credit, and I figured, why not? No kids, no work, no noise. Just us. Maybe it's time we reconnect. She stared at me like she couldn't decide whether I was bluffing or broken. Then she smiled. Small, confused, but real. You're serious? I'm offering, I said. Your call. She agreed before we even hit the next red light. The drive up was full of neutral pleasantries. She asked if I'd seen the new backsplash the neighbors installed. I asked if she'd finally gotten around to replacing her cracked phone screen. We didn't touch the deeper topics. That was by design. The Ridge was everything she remembered. Polished wood cabins. Oversized throw blankets. Gourmet meals that looked like Pinterest had sex with a French chef. We were greeted with lemon water and a staff that knew our names before we gave them. That was also by design. What she didn't know, and would never suspect, is that the Ridge was owned by a holding company. That holding company belonged to a client of mine. A quiet, well-dressed billionaire who owed me a favor and liked the idea of his retreat being used for, let's call it domestic clarification. She didn't notice the subtle things, like the fact that the concierge never asked for ID, or that the fireplace logs were already burning when we arrived, or that our cabin had no visible cameras, because the ones that mattered were in the walls, and ceiling, and above the bed. Every word we spoke, every moment we touched, every time she contradicted herself, it was all time-stamped, recorded, encrypted. I told Amanda I didn't want a messy divorce. I wanted a documented one. That weekend, I gave her every opportunity to speak honestly. I asked questions like, do you think we drifted, or was it always like this? Have you ever been tempted, even a little? If we wiped the slate clean, what would you actually want? She answered like someone applying for a job she thought she already had. No, never. I'd never do that. You've always been enough. I just got distracted. She cried once. At the spa. Said she felt like we were finally talking again. I held her hand across the dinner table. Let her laugh into her wine. Let her believe. She even initiated sex the second night. Slow, performative, like she was acting out a role she thought I wanted to see. I let her finish. Then I rolled over, kissed her forehead, and whispered, thank you. She said she felt closer than we'd been in years. I said nothing. Because you don't interrupt a confession when the tape's still running. Sunday morning, before checkout, she curled up on the deck with a blanket, sipping espresso like a woman who had survived a storm. This was exactly what we needed, she said. Yeah. I replied, watching the steam rise from her cup. She had no idea what she'd given me. Every word, Every inconsistency captured. The false remorse. The passive blame shifting. The full-body lie of a woman who thinks comfort can erase consequence. She walked into that retreat hoping for a clean slate. And she was leaving with a signed confession, bound in metadata. We drove home in silence. Comfortable silence, she probably thought. But for me, it was the silence of a hunter zipping his bag shut. The plane leveled out somewhere above New Hampshire when I reached into my carry-on. She was mid-sentence, going on about how things felt different now, how she wanted to reframe the past few months as a rough chapter we'd survived together. She even used the phrase fresh start, said it like she'd invented it. I nodded, reached beneath my seat, and unzipped the compartment. Out came a slim black folder. Unmarked. Clean. I placed it gently on the tray between us like it was dessert she hadn't ordered. "What's this?" she asked, still smiling, like I was about to surprise her with a love letter. I didn't say anything. She opened it, and the smile died so quickly it looked like a switch had flipped behind her eyes. First page. A photo of her and Darren behind the pool house, his hand on her waist, her lips on his. Second, screenshots of messages, names she thought she'd deleted, coded texts, private DMs, time-stamped, cross-referenced. Third, the spreadsheet. Locations, dates, expenses, plane tickets that didn't match the stories. Restaurant bills she thought I never saw. Venmo receipts buried in the blur. She flipped faster now, breath quickening. Then came the final page. A single line, filing date, next Friday. Underneath it, a printed copy of the filing intake. No drama, just a form, with her full name, and the box ticked for irreconcilable misconduct. She didn't speak for a full 10 seconds. Then, "You're filing?" she whispered, her voice breaking like thin glass. "I am," I said, calm, almost polite. "I wanted you to see why." She looked around the cabin. Other passengers were reading magazines, watching movies, sipping seltzer. We were just another couple, flying home. Until she snapped. "You planned this?" she shrieked, voice rising over the hum of the jet engines. "This whole weekend, it was a setup?" Heads turned. A flight attendant approached cautiously. "Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to lower your voice." "No," she barked, standing up, jabbing a finger toward me. "He trapped me. He recorded everything. You've been waiting to do this." Passengers in row 17 started filming. She was spiraling now, wild-eyed, mascara smudged from sudden tears she didn't expect to need. She slapped the folder closed, tried to shove it back at me, but her hands shook too much. "You're sick," she hissed. "You're evil. Who even does this?" I looked up at her, then at the attendant beside us, now holding a hand radio and motioning discreetly toward the cockpit. "I'm going to need you to stay seated," the attendant said softly. "Let's all stay calm." My wife was trembling, face flushed. "This was your plan the whole time, wasn't it? You wanted me to break, to melt down in public like some crazy." I turned toward her fully and said the words like I was reciting a recipe. "You said I wasn't a real man," I said, just loud enough for the rows around us to hear. "You were right." I leaned in closer. Not threatening, not even angry, just final. "I'm something else." She stared at me, lips parted, and for once, no words came. The folder sat between us like a tombstone. The hum of the plane felt louder now, like it was amplifying her failure in stereo. She didn't cry. She didn't scream again. She just sat down, like someone who finally realized the ground had disappeared under them miles ago, and the fall had just started. And I buckled my seatbelt, reached for my coffee, and watched the clouds roll by like they had nothing to do with her collapse. Same restaurant, different night. This time, the air was cooler, sharper, the kind of late autumn breeze that cuts through silk and sentiment alike. I waited inside just long enough to watch the laughter ripple across her new circle, thin, brittle laughter that sounded rehearsed. Her friends sat around her, sipping cocktails they couldn't pronounce, dressed for social war. She looked good, calculatedly good, hair curled just so, dress that hinted at modesty but knew better. They were gossiping about some friend's divorce. She laughed too loud, like someone trying to stay above water. Her smile was on autopilot. But when the black SUV rolled up again, same make, same engine hum, Everything inside her paused. I stepped out from the shadows of the bar, straightened my sleeves, buttoned my coat. She saw me through the window and froze. Her friends looked too, confused at first, curious, then wide-eyed as they recognized the driver. Mira. She sat behind the wheel like she belonged there. Leather jacket, one hand on the steering wheel, sunglasses resting low on her nose even though the sun had dipped behind the buildings. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. I opened the passenger door. Wait. Daniel. My wife's voice cracked as she shoved her chair back, nearly knocking over a glass. She ran out of the restaurant like the building was on fire. Hair catching in the wind. Heels loud on the pavement. No more grace. No more performance. Just desperation. Please, she gasped. Please don't do this. They're all watching. They'll think I'm the... She cut herself off. Villain. I finished for her, one foot already in the car. I looked over my shoulder, into her tear-lined eyes. Her friends had followed her to the sidewalk now, standing in a neat little half-circle. Some whispered. One of them took out her phone. You told them I wasn't a real man, I said, voice calm. Not cruel, just absolute. Now they finally believe you. The door closed with the softest click I've ever heard. Final. Painless. Like shutting a file you'll never open again. Mira didn't say a word, just shifted into gear. My wife stood there, mouth open, arms limp at her sides. She didn't scream this time. Didn't beg. She just watched. Watched as the SUV pulled away. As the taillights grew smaller. As Myra's profile caught the glow of passing street lamps and made her look untouchable. And then she turned around. Her friends weren't laughing anymore. They weren't asking questions. They were just looking at her like they finally understood the punchline, and it wasn't funny. She stood there, abandoned by the narrative she'd written. And for the first time in her life, there was no stage. No applause. Just silence. And the sound of her own story, ending.